When you're a beginner and you hear beautiful music in your head, but it's not quite coming out your violin the way you want it to, it can be really frustrating. Whether you're struggling with intonation, good sound quality, or you just know that there's something off about the way your position looks compared to professional violinists. I am convinced, though, that even as a beginner, you don't need to look, sound, or feel like a screeching owl beginner violinist. You can actually make phenomenal progress very quickly. And I base that on over 20 years of violin teaching. I've noticed that the beginner issues that most commonly affect adults are a little bit different than the ones that really young children struggle with. So in today's video, we are focusing on those adult beginner issues, and I've distilled the top 10 that I see most commonly. I've organized these top 10 into a few that have to do with the violin specifically, a few that have to do with the bow, and then a few that have to do with putting it all together with left and right hand coordination, and even a little bit about mindset. Let's knock them out. Number 1. The most common beginner mistake that I see adults in particular make is tilting their head this way on the violin instead of having your head neutral or slightly tilted toward your violin to your left, which is the way we want our head to be. Now, the reason why most beginners do this, and I think honestly every single adult beginner I have ever started tilts their head the wrong way. And I think the reason is because you're looking for those tapes and you're trying to see where you're putting your fingers on the violin. So you start putting your head kind of forward and this way so that your perspective is right in 90 degrees from the angle of your violin so you can see those tapes. So the problem with that is that, one, it looks really funny to go like this. If you were looking in a mirror or watching a video of yourself, you would notice that professional violinists don't do this with their head. But the other thing is it creates muscle tension in your neck when you do that. And so when you're just beginning the violin, you might not notice a problem with that. But over time, as you advance and spend more time practicing, you're going to notice more and more probably pain and tension in those neck muscles. So you don't actually want to be putting your head this way. It also kind of affects your sound because as you're going like this, your sound is kind of going this way into the floor, through the F-holes and into the floor. And really what you want is to think of yourself more like a ballerina or just someone who stands up really straight and tall. Think of it almost like the tilt of your body is this way, not that way. Number 2, probably equally common mistake is letting your wrist collapse into the violin like this, which kind of makes sense because you're grabbing the violin, everything feels new and different, and you end up kind of going like this. The problem is, when you do this, it's actually very difficult to reach the notes. How are you going to reach your 4th finger when it's really difficult to spread your fingers out, and it'll be very difficult to play with dexterity that way. So the proper position is to have everything flat like a tabletop. See how my arm, my hand, my arm, everything just makes this very flat shape, and it goes onto the violin this way, not this way. The third most common issue I see is shoulder tension. So that could be in your left shoulder because you're trying to hold your violin up, or it can be in your right shoulder because, right shoulder, because you're getting toward the frog with your bow and you don't actually realize that your shoulder is coming up at the same time. So try to just practice having those shoulders down and neutral and relaxed. The 4th most common issue is actually untrimmed nails. Now, of course, I see this more with women than with men, but if you've let your nails kind of grow out a little bit, you're going to have a difficult time putting your fingers down in the right place. And that's going to affect the clarity of your sound if it's difficult to push the strings all the way down, or you're playing out of tune because your fingers aren't quite in the right spot because you've got these long nails that you're dealing with. You actually want to be putting your fingers down right on the tip of each finger, completely covering the tape. If you see any of the tape as you put your finger down, that probably means your finger's too flat, it's too low, and you need to scooch it up a little bit. So if you see my fingers as I hold them up here, you can see that my nails are trimmed really, really short. The fifth most common issue that I see is not adjusting the shoulder bar and sometimes even the chin rest to a place that gives you the best support to hold your violin properly. And the reason why that's important is because it can be very painful and difficult, and you can be using a lot of tension to hold up your violin and end up in a funny position that eventually affects your sound too, because you don't have a really comfortable violin setup. So I do have another video, I won't go into lots of detail, I have another video where I show you how to adjust your shoulder bar and how to do a check to make sure that your shoulder bar is really working for you. So you can check out that video if you feel like your setup is not comfortable and you can't easily drop your left hand and still be able to play and talk and hold the violin comfortably. Okay. Let's talk about the bow. The bow is really tricky, so don't feel frustrated if you're still struggling with your bow hold and all of that. Even when I was a super senior in college, my violin professor was still working on my bow hold. So it's just something that you're always going to be working on and getting better over time. But among beginners, the most common and quickly fixable issues that I see, let me grab my violin, are first, not staying on the highway. So that's one term that I've heard for just talking about making sure that your bow is actually only playing on the strings right in between the edge of the fingerboard and the bridge. So if your bow is getting too close to the bridge, it's going to sound like this. You get that screechy owl kind of sound. Or if it's starting to veer this way over the fingerboard, you lose a lot of sound and it gets really kind of wispy, which is not a great sound either. But if you place your bow right in between the edge of the fingerboard and the bridge, you'll get a much bigger, fuller sound. Number 7, related to that, this is another one that I can't think of any beginning violinist that I've worked with who ever didn't do this at first. And that's what my violin teacher growing up called playing behind your back. So that's going like this. See how my bow immediately went crooked? You want your bow to stay parallel with your bridge. And so if your bow starts going this way, you're going to lose a lot of sound. This is how we get that beginner kind of sound, but it's really fixable. The way to fix it though is you just have to stand in front of a mirror. I know some people don't like watching themselves in a mirror looking like a beginner or feeling kind of funny about it, but I really encourage you to find the biggest mirror in your house because you can fix this very quickly if you look in a mirror and make sure that your bow is right here, like we talked about, right in between the fingerboard and the bridge, staying in that spot, and stays parallel with your bridge. But you can't really see it properly without a mirror because the angles on the violin are so funny. Most beginners will start going like this, trying to see it, and will think, based on what they're seeing, that it's straight. But if you were watching yourself in a mirror, or if you were a different person and you were watching what you were doing somehow, you would see very quickly and clearly that it's not straight. But when you're doing it with these angles on the violin, you just can't see it. So you've got to stand in front of a mirror and work on keeping that bow exactly parallel to the bridge, like this. I'm going to use the camera as my mirror here, and I'm going to look in the mirror and watch my bow. fix 6 and 7, these two beginner mistakes about where your bow goes on the string, you're not going to sound like a screechy owl beginner violinist. You're going to have a much better, cleaner, fuller sound. Number 8, one more thing with the bow, and that's about how much pressure or weight you're putting on that bow. So this is where we think of the Goldilocks principle. You don't want too much or too little. You want it to be just right. And the way to figure out what's just right is to listen to this sound. So if you're putting too much pressure or too much weight on the bow, you're going to get a scratchy sound like this. And if you're putting too little pressure on the bow, it's going to have this very wispy, light kind of floating sound like this. Sounds kind of tentative. So what I want you to do is to practice just playing some open strings. Pick one string and stick with it for a minute or two, and just practice intentionally playing too hard and then too light, and then find that sweet spot in between those two levels of pressure where you get a good full sound that's not too scratchy. Number 9. Now these last two biggest beginner mistakes are about coordination, putting it all together. Because one of the things that makes the violin tricky is that your left hand is doing something quite different than your right hand. But guess what? Don't be discouraged about that, because that's what makes it such a good workout for your brain. Playing the violin is actually really, really good for your brain at any age. When you start reading these studies and you see how good of a workout this is, it actually can reduce and even in some cases reverse cognitive decline. That's how powerful it is to be practicing the violin. So don't get discouraged. Just remember, this is a workout. So this is what I mean about coordination. It's easy for your violin fingers to go a little bit faster than your bow is going. Or for your bow to start going faster than your left hand fingers. So the way to fix this is to practice setting your fingers. Suzuki had a good motto for this. I think, what did he call it? Where'd it go? Okay, here it is. I just thought this was so well put. He said, "It is impossible to produce a clear, beautiful tone if you try to place your fingers and move the bow simultaneously. You must first place your fingers properly on the string, and then set the bow without digging into the string. Only after that should you start playing. This sequence is what is meant by finger, bow, then go." In other words, set your left hand finger all the way down on the string first before your bow plays that note. And then when you play it faster, your left hand will always come down ever so slightly before your bow. It'll just be so fast that it won't seem like that. But if you're playing with your bow before you've had a chance to set your left hand finger into place, it's just not going to sound good. Number 10. I see this specifically among adults, which is the tendency to grip the violin really hard as you're playing it and grip the bow like it's going to fall out of your fingers. Relax. Your violin is a solid, not a liquid, and it's very light. So try to hold onto it lightly. Just make sure that your fingers are pressing all the way down on the string so that you don't get this kind of... That's what it sounds like if your finger isn't all the way down versus a nice clean sound. So you want to make sure that your fingers are all the way down, but that doesn't mean that everything has to be really, really tense as you hold it. Quick bonus number 11, which is really important, and that's about mindset. Specifically, beginning adult violinists often tend to be really embarrassed about playing for other people. Maybe this is not you, and if so, I'm really glad. But a lot of my beginning adult students are kind of embarrassed to play in front of other people because they're They want to practice until they think they sound really good before they go embarrass themselves in front of other people playing for them. The best way to overcome nervousness is just to practice playing in front of people. Practice playing in front of people even before you sound good. If you do Irish fiddle, go join an Irish fiddle session with other people. Or if you're playing more classical music, invite some of your friends together, maybe have some beer. Have a good time and take out your violin and just play for them what you've been learning. What you'll find if you do that is that you grow steadily in confidence the longer you've been playing. And if you have nice friends, they will be really happy for you that you've taken up this new hobby, and they'll also be encouraged because you were brave and bold enough to share your beginner hobby with them before you sounded professional or whatever it is that you expect of yourself. In lesson 10, our last video in this series, we're going to be talking about reading music, or more specifically, how to approach reading music when you're a brand new beginner. You might be surprised that you don't need to start reading notes right away. So what I recommend instead is this technique that I'll show you in the next video for learning music without needing to sight read. With the caveat that eventually, of course, we are going to learn to sight read too. Until then, I hope these 11 beginner mistakes and how to fix them help you share something beautiful with your music, and I'll see you in the next video.